Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how to make this fun scene slimline card using some of Lawn Fawn's newest supplies from their June 2021 release, featuring that big happy birthday to you die in the middle and then some of their other jungle themed products like the border die, stencil, and stamps. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by blending the background panel, and for this I'm using 3 colors of Distress Oxide inks, and I wanted it to look like a sky. So the first color I used was Peacock Feathers, which is that dark teal. The second color I used is Salvaged Patina, which is a slightly lighter teal. And then the bottom color I used is Tumbled Glass, which is a very light blue, which will actually be at the top of the sky. So the Peacock Feathers will be at the bottom, Salvaged Patina in the middle, and Tumbled Glass at the top. And I'm just blending these colors with my blending tools in sort of horizontal lines so that you get that sort of gradation of color from dark at the bottom to light at the top. And I'm just going back and forth between the colors to make sure I get a nice blend. I like using my foam blending tools for things like this because I find you get sort of a stronger application of color with the foam blending tools as compared to brushes, and I really wanted it to be a really strong blue background. Next, I'm adding a pattern to this background using the new Tropical Background Stencil from Lawn Fawn, and I wanted this to be a very tone-on-tone look. So I just taped that stencil down onto the paper, and now I'm using the same 3 colors to ink over the stencil. So at the bottom I used Peacock Feathers, in the middle I used Salvaged Patina, and at the top I'm using Tumbled Glass. You don't have to work too hard to blend the colors on this because the images are small, but you can just, as long as you use the same colors that you used on the background, it'll really look like this beautiful subtle tone-on-tone pattern. Now this stencil actually has 2 stencils in this set that sort of overlap to create the full pattern, and I think the reason I did this is that it's easier to use different colors. But for me, I just used the same colors on both. So I put the second stencil on in the spaces where the openings were from the first stencil, and then I just used the same 3 colors to blend on. Now you'll notice that this stencil is not big enough for the whole panel. It was actually sized, I think, for a standard sized A2 card, not a slimline. So in order to finish off that pattern, I'm just overlaying the same stencil onto the open space of the cardstock panel and just doing the same thing with the same colors. And again, I'm just doing this with both stencils in the set. Again, overlaying the second one into the open spaces from the first. And you'll see with that, it does cover the whole panel. You'll notice there is like a distinct line from where the first stencil ended and the second one began, but I knew I was going to be covering that up with a lot of elements on the card, so I wasn't too worried about it. Okay, so next I'm going to be blending panels that I'm going to be using for that bottom sort of leafy border that you'll see on the finished card. So I'm blending the panels first, and then I'll die cut them with the Slimline Tropical Leaves border die. For each of these panels, I'm using 2 colors so that I get a bit of an ombre gradation effect. For this one, I'm using 2 yellows. I think it's Squeezed Lemonade and Wild Honey. And for the second panel, I'm using 2 greens, so that's Lucky Clover and Twisted Citron as the lighter one. And again, I'm just using the same technique where I'm taking my foam blending tools and just applying that ink as in a very sort of heavy-handed way because I wanted it to be very opaque and bold color, and just kind of going back and forth to make sure that I get a nice blend between the colors. And I like to use a scrap piece of paper to sort of hold on to the pieces when I get a lot of ink on them so I don't get ink on my fingers. I wanted there to be a bit of splatter on these, so I took some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, which is a brown color, and splattered it out onto the pieces to get that kind of ground looking splatter. Next it's time to stamp, and I'm using images from the new Toucan Do It stamp set, and I'm going to be stamping out a whole bunch of them, so the 2 jaguars, the 2 toucans, the couple little critters like the butterflies and the lizard, and then a few other little flowers and leaves. And I'm using my Mini Misty stamping tool for this so I can get a nice, clean, crisp black image by stamping them all out twice. I'm using my Gina Amalgam ink, which I find is a really nice ink for black stamping and Copic coloring. I find it doesn't smear as much as some other inks that I've tested. I stamped these images out onto some Neenah Solar White cardstock as well, which I find is a really nice cardstock for Copic coloring. So with all of that, I can go ahead and start coloring in these cute images. I've talked a lot about my Copic coloring technique in other videos, so definitely check those out if you're interested. But for now, I am going to go ahead and put on some music so you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the coloring, and I will be back when we're ready to start putting the card together. Of course, if you don't want to watch the coloring, feel free to skip ahead in the video as well. Okay, so now that all of the images are colored and cut out, I'm going to go ahead and start putting this card together, and I'll talk about some of the other elements that went into it as well. So first I'm gluing down that inked and stenciled panel onto a slimline card base, which I do at 8.5 by 3.5 inches. And then I can start assembling the other elements. So you can see here I went ahead off camera and die cut those two other blended panels with the Tropical Leaves Slimline border die. And that creates that really fun tropical leaves pattern at the bottom. And I'm going to be overlaying those to get a cool sort of double leaf effect. I'm gluing down the first one directly onto the card panel with some liquid glue. And as you can see, I already glued down a couple of my stamped leaves because I wanted them to be tucked behind this. So I glued them down first, and now I can glue down that yellow border piece. I wanted the green border piece to be slightly elevated to give the card a bit of dimension, so I'm using some foam tape on the back. I just put a whole line along the bottom, and then I'm going to put little pieces on some of the leaves just to give them a little bit of extra support. And then I'll be able to just stick down that whole piece right onto the card so that it sticks up from the bottom and gives that dimension. Off camera, I also embossed a piece of brown Neenah Desert Storm cardstock with a wood grain embossing folder to give it a bit of texture, and then I cut it out with the Happy Birthday to You die, which is that big Happy Birthday to You sentiment that I'm adding glue to right now. I also cut it out of some white cardstock, and then I can glue them together like this, a little bit offset, and I find that that just gives a nice sort of backing effect to those words and helps them stand out a little bit. Once I've glued those together, I can then add little squares of foam to the back, and I'm using the same foam tape that I used for that grassy border die at the bottom because I want this die to sort of sit on top of that. So it'll be glued to the grass at the bottom or to the tropical leaves at the bottom and then elevated on foam at the top so that everything is the same sort of height. So there you can see I'm sticking down the Happy Birthday to You, and it's sort of at the same elevation as that grassy leaf border at the bottom. Okay, so now I've just sort of gone ahead and decorated the card, which in my opinion is sort of the most fun thing to do. Just sort of aligning where all the images should go to make a cute little scene, and then I can start gluing them all down. So I'm just using some liquid glue for most of the images and some foam squares for others, just to give a little bit of dimension. I put a few of the flowers around the scene as well, just to bring in some extra pops of color. And that is it. That is the card for today. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you don't mind my cat sort of invading the camera space here as she likes to do. But I really love sort of how fun you can make these tropical scenes with all the cute little critters, and the stenciled background really adds a nice detail. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you do like this video, make sure to check out the other videos I have on my channel. Please do like and subscribe, as that helps too. And if you like my cards, make sure to head over to my Instagram account, which has a bunch more. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!